Hello, everybody. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Part 2, Chapter 5. It's a little improper, but so amusing that I wanted to tell you about it, said Vronsky, looking at his cousin's sparkling eyes. However, I will not mention any names, but I can guess so much the better. Listen, then, 2 young men, just a little officers of your regiment, of course. I did not say that they were officers, but simply young men who had dined well. Translated tipsy. Possibly. Go to dine with a comrade. They are in very excellent spirits. They see a young woman passing them in a hired carriage. She turns around, and as it seems to them, looks at them and laughs. They follow her on the double quick. To their great surprise, their beauty stops before the very house where they were going. She mounts to the upper floor, and they see nothing but a pair of rosy lips under a veil, and a pair of very pretty little feet. But you describe the scene so vividly as to make me believe that you were in the party. Why do you accuse me so soon? No, my 2 young men climbed up to their comrade's room, who was going to give a farewell dinner, and these parting ceremonies compel them to drink, perhaps, more than was good for them. They question their hosts about the inmates of the house. He knows nothing at all about it. Their friend's valet, to their questions, "Are there any mamsells here?" replies that there are a good many. After dinner, the 2 men go into their friend's library and write a fiery letter to their unknown, full of passionate protestations. They themselves carry up the letter in order to explain whatever might not be understood. But why do you tell me such horrible things? No, they ring. A girl comes to the door. They give her the letter, telling her they are so smitten that they are ready to die, then and there, where they are. The girl parleys with them. Suddenly, a gentleman appears, red as a lobster, and with side whiskers like sausages, and he unceremoniously puts them out of the door, declaring that there is no one there except his wife. "How did you know that his side whiskers were like sausages?" demanded Betsy. "But you shall see. I've just made peace between them. No, what came of it? This is the most interesting part of the affair. The happy couple proved to be a titular councillor and his wife. The titular councillor brings a complaint, and I'm obliged to serve as a peacemaker. What a diplomatist! Talleyrand, compared to me, was nobody. What, did you have difficulties? Davolt, listen. We began by making the very best excuse that we could, as was proper enough. We're desperately sorry, we said, for this unfortunate occurrence. The titular councillor seemed to be calming down a little, but he felt it necessary to express his feelings, and as soon as he began to express his feelings, he began to get wrathy. And he said very impudent things, and I was obliged to bring my diplomatic talents into requisition. I agree that their conduct was most reprehensible, but please remember that there was a misunderstanding. They were young and had just come for a good dinner. You understand? Now they are sorry from the bottom of their hearts, and beg you to forgive them their fault. The titular councillor softened still more. I agree with you, Count, but I'm ready to pardon them. But you perceive that my wife, a virtuous woman, has been exposed to insult, to persecution, to the impudence of good-for-nothing young fellows being present. I have to exert myself to calm them down, and so to resume my diplomatic efforts over and over again. Every time I seem on the point of success, my titular councillor gets wrathy again, and his face gets red, and his sausages begin to wag up and down, and I find myself drowned in the waves of diplomatic subtleties. Ah, we must tell you all about this, said Betsy to a lady who at this moment came into her box. It has amused me very much. No, bonne chance, she said, giving Vronsky the ends of her fingers, and she held her fan. And then shrugging her shoulders so as to keep the waist of her dress from coming up, she went to the front of the box, where she sat down in the full blaze of gas, in the eyes of all. Vronsky went to the French theatre to meet the colonel of his regiment, who never failed to be present at a single representation. It was with him that he wished to speak in regard to this business of patching up the peace, which had occupied and amused him for 3 days. The heroes of this affair were his comrade Petritsky and a charming young fellow, Prince Kurdrov, who had lately joined their regiment. The principal point was that the affair concerned the interests of his regiment, for both the young men belonged to Vronsky's company. Venden, the titular councillor, had lodged with the colonel a complaint that the officers had insulted his wife. His young wife, Venden told the colonel, to whom he had been married scarcely 5 months, had been to church with her mother, and feeling indisposed, had engaged the first izvoshchik at hand, in order to reach home quickly. The officers had chased her. She had come home feeling still more ill in consequence of her emotion and of having run up the stairs. Vendham himself had just returned from the office when he heard voices and the sound of a bell. Seeing that he had to do with a pair of drunken officers, he had pitched them out of the door. He demanded that they should be severely punished. "No, it's all very well to talk," said the colonel to Vronsky, who had come to the summons to talk with him, "but Petritsky is becoming unbearable. Not a week goes by without some scandal. This chinovnik will not stop here. He will go further." Vronsky saw the unpleasant consequence of this affair, and he felt that a duel must not be, and that it was much better to make the titular councillor relent and smooth over the scandal. The colonel had summoned him because he knew that he was a shrewd and gentlemanly man, and zealous for the interests of the regiment. It was after their consultation that Vronsky, accompanied by Petritsky and Kurdrov, had gone to carry their excuses to the titular councillor, in the hope that his name and the epaulettes of aide-de-camp might succeed in calming the angry titular councillor. Vronsky had only partially succeeded, and as he had just related, and the reconciliation seemed dubious. At the theatre, Vronsky took the colonel into the lobby and told him of the success, or rather the lack of success, which had attended his mission. After reflection, the colonel decided to leave the matter to abeyance. But he could not help laughing as he heard Vronsky's lively description of the wrath of the titular councillor, and his repeated attempts to bring him into a suitable frame of mind. "It's a wretched piece of business, but exceedingly amusing. Still, Kurdrov could not fight with his gentleman. And how do you like Claire this evening?" "Charming," said he, referring to the French actress. "One can't see her too often. She's always new. Let alone the French for that."